Welcome to Pentecostal Preaching Channel. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what you see. Hit the bell to be notified when something new is uploaded. Have a great day.
Down to it. Oh, that brought it out. Remember Sunday morning when y'all come to my class eat donuts, I want some clapping down, right? That's the first thing that ever happened. You already know all that good stuff. I just thought I fed you. Okay. Well, I would first like to clear up a couple matters that he brought up there. Number one, yes, I am Pentecostal. And I know you've had a couple of people come here and speak to you that were not Pentecostal, and I actually heard a rumor, since I do teach a lot of you guys on Sunday mornings and feed you, that this is supposed to be serious today. He told me that. This is chapel service, so I'm not a preacher, though, so you can only expect so much. But I promise you will not be crying before the day's over, right? But a couple things I'd like to clear up, and number one is that I did donate. And I understand that there was one fellow here, and somebody looked at another guy sitting in this audience saying, I won't point any fingers. But one of you leaned over to another one and said he had to donate. And so I just want to clear that right up front that I did donate. And get that out of your mind. So I'm here today because I donated. All right. I think y'all probably know what I'm talking about. Everybody's been real quiet. Everybody's kind of looking around going, oh, Jesus, 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 Jesus. So they just start calling names, man. What does CAP stand for? Catch a preacher or what? I want to repeat that. Center for Grant Pastoral Schools. Okay. Well, I just thought when he said CAP college, I thought the guy said he was a member of our CAP program. This is his nice wife. I thought, I got that. You know, that don't take a real genius. I've often wondered why women come over here. You know, I see these girls come to church and they're great Christian ladies, and they just look at all the guys and all that. And it's a great place to meet people. And I think it's a great idea, really. I think that we should have more ladies in our ministry. And I'm not saying pastors. I don't know anything about all that. I'll stay completely away from these critical issues. Today, what I'd like to do is to introduce you a little bit to what I do and where I'm from, and actually some of the reasons I'm up here, other than I donated. But I'll tell you another thing. I'll never live that down. Never. I'll always have to eat that from now on. We are lay people in our church. We're not preachers. I teach a Sunday school class because I feel like I'm to do what God sent me to do. And as far as I know right now, that's what God sent me to do, so that's what I'm doing. And until he directs me in another direction, I'm going to keep teaching singles. And I thoroughly enjoy it, and I write my own materials, and I enjoy doing that, and it keeps me in the book, and it keeps me studying and praying, because the toughest people I've ever taught before have been the singles. I mean, you guys got big problems, you know what I mean? And it takes a lot of studying to figure out how to solve y'all's problems. So, but I understand that because I was there one time myself. I was single when I was 22 and got married and then wondered why I was not still single. And but now I know why, because I love my wife and I have a great no. Guys, I give it a 10. That's so stupid. Okay. Okay, no more giving. No more giving. We'll cut out all the donations. Okay. Get. Go our way and sin no more. All right. At least it's not on video. All right. Thank you. A couple of things that I promised my wife that I was going to be good today. She said, Jesus, help us, Lord. I said, don't go over there and embarrass the family. I said, baby, I'll do my best, you know. That was the first thing. Would you please? Oh, Lord, help us, Jesus. I'll get nervous here in a minute. But she said, would you please go over there and keep everything on the up and up and not embarrass Brother Enzy and his wife and not embarrass me and the kids. And I said, I'll do my best. So I even made notes, which I very rarely, when I have to read these things, can't speak from notes. But I made myself some notes so I can stay on target, because if I don't, I'll start rambling. And you don't want that, I can assure you. But let me give you a little background on myself. I feel like that God has called me to do something, and I feel like that I have to bear fruit to be used of God in the way that we're called, all of us as Christians. If we don't bear fruit, God says that he'll prune us. So I feel like my role as a layman is to bear fruit, as your role as a pastor, preacher, teacher, whatever you're going to be when you grow up. Whatever that means. But also, one other thing I'd like to get clear before I get cranked up here, I was told that I was going to speak to a bunch of young people. There's people here with no hair. I don't know if he owns the place or what, but I mean, these are not young people. These are beyond adolescence away. But I had a lot of hair till a year ago, and I mean, mine just went right down the shower drain. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's just going every day. All right. I'd like to start off today by asking you why you're here. Okay? Because I really have wondered, as I have studied what Texas Bible College and the other Bible colleges mean to our organization. And I will tell you right up front that I think that as a whole, our organization has not placed the emphasis on teaching and training new pastors and teachers and preachers as we should have. Because I believe that you are the foundation for the future church. And whether you agree with that or not really doesn't matter to me. But I have often wondered why we go through such strange means to build Bible colleges and let them struggle for years and years, and yet that is the basis for our future. So I'm a very big advocate of Bible colleges and of what you're here to do. And I hope that in some small way that I am able today, in the past, and in the future to influence others to be participants in building future Bible colleges and supporting Bible colleges and actually enhancing their facilities, their teaching methods, their technology that they use to teach. Because I feel like that if we don't teach and train in quality ways, that we will end up with a mediocre church. And I don't think that God placed any of us here to do a mediocre work. God's word is not mediocre. The salvation that we have is a long way to being mediocre. And I think it's a definition of excellence. There's a lot of books written on excellence, and I think if you could get right down to the core root of the word excellent, you would find that it means God. And to do anything less than excellent in God's work, I think, is really to be described, I hope I'm not on line here, as an apostasy. And I believe that we should go forward trying to instill excellence into everything we do in Christian education. And in Sunday schools, we're dropping the ball big time in Sunday schools. We're teaching kids, and Brother Lindsay can tell you I'm doing this for hours. But we're teaching our kids on do-it-home photography. I mean, my daughter brought home a piece of paper here several months back that had a little boy and girl on the front cover, and they were green. They were printing green. We chose green. Someone up top chose green. And my daughter even asked, why are these people green? You know, and I said, baby, maybe they're green people. You know? I understand people around St. Louis and on the north are all green. You know, maybe those are Yankee people. You know. However, I know they're not. I've been up there; they're not really green. But I have a real problem. I have two children. I have a 4-year-old and a 10-year-old. And you're going to think I'm rambling a little bit today as I go through this. There's really a thought behind this, and I have no text. I have no name or title of what I'm talking to you about today, other than the simplicity and the quality of what we're here to do. Okay? So that's kind of the context that I'm talking to you today. At any time during this thing today that you would like to ask me a question about what I do, what I think, I'm very opinionated and do not mind sharing what I think or feel about anything, so raise your hand and I'll be glad to answer anything you may have. Good point. But I think we have to enhance the quality that we're doing, everything we're doing. Sunday school, the way we talk to our new converts, we're losing probably 80% of everybody we win. So what kind of battle are we really fighting? It's fine to teach pastors how to preach. It's fine to teach them or to develop their skills. But when we get them into the church, if the pastors have not been taught how to hone those new Christians and babes in the Lord into solid saints, then it's not doing any good. So I have watched in my own church, I say my own church, I feel that it is my church. It's the role of the Pentecostal church, my pastor, Brother Ron Mason. And I've seen his frustration with bringing new people in. We prayed through 50, 75, almost 80 in the last probably 120 days into the church. We probably have 25 of those people there today. Very discouraging for me as a layman in the church to see us sit there and just let those people walk right back out and go right back to doing what they were doing when they came in and God saved them. You know? Does that ever bother you? It bothers me real bad, and I feel like that until I do something about it personally, that nothing's going to get done. You ever felt that way? You get the feeling like everybody else is out there just being mediocre, and you've got to do something about it. Well, that's the way I feel today. And one of the reasons that I donated to Texas Bible College, and I'll be real upfront with you, it was not because of Brother Prince or Brother Envy or Brother Holly or any kind of recognition. In fact, I asked, they'll tell you right up front that my name never be mentioned. I didn't want anything to do with the publicity of it. I hate publicity. I like privacy. I like to live my own life. I don't want anybody to know anything. But I feel like that somebody has got to stand up and do something. Okay? And I'm not ashamed to do that, and I'm not bashful about what I believe. I'm not ashamed of our holiness standards. I'm not ashamed of being Pentecost. And in fact, I have a lot of heritage and a lot of blood in me, that's Pentecostal blood. And there's been a lot of great services that my forefathers and the ancestors have set through that I feel like that are part of what I am today. It's part of my foundation of what I'm rooted in. So, number one, I'm Pentecostal. Number two, I am an entrepreneur. And sometimes I call that an entrepreneur because there are times when you feel that way. Sure, that was a line. Positive. Entrepreneurs are known as being risk takers. Okay? So, maybe you can look at me as a risk taker because I have put everything on the line for what I believe in. Okay? And there are times that those deals work out, and there are times those deals don't work out. I have witnessed some extreme success, I feel like, in my own right. And thank God for that, and He's the reason for it. And I can tell you an entire story on that one of these days if you would enjoy probably hearing, because I was not a success when we started, and one day I knelt down behind my desk and said, God, I'm through with it. It's over. The end. Can't handle it any longer. It's killing me. I'm working 20-hour days, sleeping at the office. My family was, kind of growing apart. Anytime you let something else become your God, you'll find out your whole world falls apart. And the day I finally knelt down behind the desk and said, God, take it. I don't want anything else to do with it. Get it. I'll get rid of the cars. I'll get rid of everything. If you want me to, I don't care. I'm through with it. It immediately turned around. And I think God knew that I was sincere in what I was saying because I'm still sincere today in the same way. Today, I drive nice cars, and I live in a nice home, and I have a nice business, and I have several hundred employees, and all that. But if God wants to take it all away today, I'll just keep living for God. Because I feel like that is where we have to be rooted. Okay? And if you root yourself in anything other than the Word, or not, it'll just absolutely collapse and fall down around you. There is no future in it. I've experienced part of that. You'll go nowhere. You may think you will for a while, but you'll end up going nowhere. So, God took our business, and it grew 13,000% compounded growth in only 48 months. And we grew from 17 employees and no business, about $400,000 a year in business, to $33 million a year in business in 4 years. And then something strange happened in my life at that point. And I will be honest with you, you graduate from level to level in your walk with God. And as you grow older, you look at things a lot different. My values have changed dramatically. What I valued at 24 as being what I really thought I wanted, today I look back on it and go, my Lord, how was I fooled? And why did I think that was so important? I thought a Porsche automobile, nice watch, stupid things. What's a watch on for you, Tell time, you buy a Timex for $8.95, does the exact same thing. They don't scratch your back, They don't wake you up in the morning. Now they do. They have these alarms on go off in Sunday school class and things. But it's amazing how your values change with your age and with your crises that your life goes through. And when the business got up to $33 million in sales, and we had sales in all over the country, and I have flown an average of about 250,000 miles a year for the last few years, and I'm going from home 3 or 4 days a week, and very difficult on the family, and all of that. And I thought, boy, we've made it. We finally arrived, and I just kept praying, God, keep me humble, keep me honest before you. Don't let me fool myself. I want knowledge, I want wisdom. And then suddenly something happened. We got with Brother Al Goffman and Brother Kirk Bates, and we started getting into the Bible study. Started writing into his marvelous light. I'm sure some of you have seen them. We had it in Spanish and English, and I'm not here to sell it. It's part of the testimony that I have. But what has happened with it is that when the Bible study came in, I made a commitment to the guys that helped us write it, and I said, if we get the thing written, I guarantee I'll publish it at any cost. And that was a big statement. And I think that God backed up and said, okay, fat boy, go for it. We'll see how far you make it. And we had always made very big money in the business. Everything had done very well, a couple $1 million a year in profits. Things rolling along very well. Didn't need anything, didn't want anything else. Had a big farm up in East Texas with cows and registered Brahmas and swimming pools and Hondas and tennis courts and lakes and stock ponds and all that mess. And the whole time you're thinking, wow, isn't this great? Boy, I'm amazing now. God's really blessing me. Well, God blessed me, but I put it in the wrong place. And when I decided to give it to God and took this Bible study out at any cost, the first year the Bible study came out, we published over 40,000 Bible studies the first year. We can contribute very safely 3,000 people, 2,000 to 3,000 people have received the whole list of the Bible study in the first year it's been out. And there are some other estimates that are higher than that, up around 5,000 to 7,000 people, which we give God the glory for that. But the first year the Bible study is out, my business has lost $4 million in the first year. Okay? I've laid off 200 of my cherished 360-something employees. I'm being very quiet right now because this is a very touchy moment. It's been a very tough year. But I went and talked to my mom about it. And you know how mothers are. And my mother, I don't tell her a whole lot. You don't have to. She pretty much knows what's going on. She's one of these people that knows more than the common mother. She knew more than I did. Tried to tell me several years back, you're in the wrong direction. It's like, oh yeah, okay, thank you. Didn't listen. Kept barreling ahead, and suddenly the brakes was going on. And I go to Mom and I said, Mother, I want to let you know that because I kind of support my mom and dad, and I think that's something we all should do as much as we can. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for my mom and dad and the foundation they gave me in God. But they set a path before me to follow and gave me an example. My mother's a very big prayer warrior, and I give God the glory for that because she's helped me many times in her prayers. I know she has. I felt the effects of it. But my mother said, son, what are you praying for? I said, what do you mean? She said, God will never put more on you than you can bear. She promised us that. And obviously you're praying for something greater in your life. And I said, well, yeah, I prayed for wisdom and knowledge from my Lord. I didn't know I had to go back to school to get it, And she said, well, if you pray for wisdom, He's giving it to you. And if you pray for knowledge, He's giving it to you. Because you only are going to learn through crisis. And that was the first time in my life that I actually opened my eyes up to the Word and realized that we all have to go through crisis. It's in the book. And it's the attitude you have while you're going through crisis that makes the difference of how you come out the backside of it. Okay? And as I was going through my crisis, God spoke to us many times through people that were not even in the church. And I know it was God because it was too direct. I had a man call me that worked for USA Today and said, what's wrong? And I had spoken for a USA Today group out of the Non-Heat Web Convention out of Atlanta a year and a half ago, last August or so. And when I got through talking, I left immediately and came back to Houston because we had such big problems. And the guy called me a couple days later and said, what's wrong? Well, nothing, you always try to smooth over everything. Nothing's wrong, man. Everything's going great. He said, well, I don't feel like everything's going great, so why don't you tell me what it is? So I said, well, I lost $900,000 this month. And he said, yeah, I'd say everything's not going real well, And in the first 90 days that the company got in trouble, we lost about $2 million. First 90 days, it was kind of like you couldn't stop it. It was like a train or like a ship in the middle of the ocean. The engine's dead and you got the wheel turned. You turn the wheel, but with the motor's dead, you don't go anywhere. The car's not pushing. Kind of like the company, you're kind of dead in the water. We're losing more money than we're bringing in. It was unbelievable. We always made big money. And suddenly, the month we published the Bible study, the thing went in the tank. Right? And I thought, now God, do you ever question God? Buddy, I did. I can tell you, I spent some days questioning God and saying, and I thought I was wrong at first. I felt so guilty about saying, God, why? And my pastor finally said, there's nothing in there that says you can't question God. There's how many times Job wanted to know why. But I said, what am I not doing? And it came to me, and I'm not going to say it was God, but it came to me that it wasn't what I was doing. It was what I was supposed to be doing. And God was trying to prepare me for something bigger and something better and something greater in His work, not greater in the world of business or whatever. But this guy from Gannett called me and said, I'll tell y'all around a little bit. I'll get off on this conversation. But the guy from Gannett called me and he said, let me give you a little advice. And I said, okay. He said, when I was in the Navy, I was a boatswain's mate or something. I forget what he told me was, some kind of officer on the ship. And he said, we learned a very valuable lesson. That anytime you get into a typhoon or a storm on the ship, he said, you never turn your back to the storm. You never turn to go the direction of the storm. You always put the bow of the ship into the storm. And you go full steam ahead and you batten down all the hatches. And you'll come out of the backside twice as fast as you would have if you had turned and tried to run away from it. And it was so profound at the time. It probably isn't to you right now, but it was so profound to me at the time. I thought, my Lord, God had to have him call me. So I called my pastor, and I didn't tell him about it. I asked if he would come talk to my staff at the office. None was Pentecostal, but none really even believers. I mean, one Arab that is, I don't know what he was. Something to do with sand, I know that it has to be. But camel raiser or something like that, I don't know. Anyhow, he's about as far from being religious as you could possibly be. But I told Brother Macy, I said, why don't you come out and sit and go through, this was the month we lost by $900,000. We just found out how much we had lost. The next month we're tracking at about a loss of about $700,000 for the month. It's kind of like, losing about $175,000 a week. And our capital was at about a $4 million base, and here we are, our capital is just being eaten away every day by about $175,000. We're going to take a real genius for the calculator to figure out how long it's going to be till you're out of business. So I said, Brother Macy, why don't you come over and talk to us? And he said, okay, I will. He said, I'm going to pray that God gives me something for these guys. I said, okay. So Brother Macy came over and sat down at the table and told the story of Joseph and went through all that, and I thought that's pretty profound. It's pretty nice. And he said, I want to leave a story with y'all. And I said, oh, brother, you're going to leave pastor stories. You know, these poor guys that were in there didn't know where he came from. I mean, they're sitting there going, you know, who's Joseph? You know, like they were totally lost. But my pastor gets to the end of his little talk, and he says, let me tell you guys something. He said, all I've said today probably won't make any difference, but if I can leave one thing with you, that there's a little bird in the northern part of the United States, Alaska, somewhere up in there, where it's frigid cold in the wintertime, it does not migrate to the south. This bird does not migrate. And he said, scientists, and whatever these people are that watch birds, because I cannot imagine doing that for a living, but whatever these people are that watch birds, supposedly have been studying this bird for years and years and years, trying to figure out how it survives the harsh winters. And they've come to the realization, after a lot of study, that this little bird, during the wintertime, he's designed to make it through the storm. His feathers are designed where they lock in together. He clamps his little claws on the limb, and he leans forward, and he puts his beak right into the wind. And he said, if you guys would just grab hold of the limb, put your beak into the wind, this was the day after the guy from Gannett called me and told me the one about the ship. He said, the storm's going to pass you by. But he said, you better keep the nose into the storm. And, I mean, all these guys are kind of going, you know, what the bird have to do with, you know, what we're doing. You know, we're losing big bucks here. But when he left, and everybody got out of the office that day, I closed the door and I said, God, thank you for sending us messages. So many times we want to hear from God, and yet we're waiting for these big thunderclaps, or in prayer we think he's going to knock us flat on our back and see visions, and maybe if I was closer to God I would, but I've never had that happen to me. But God has spoken to me through this crisis many times through other people, that a lot of them knew nothing. I had one preacher call right in the middle of this thing. He said, hey, I was praying last week and fasting for my church, and he said, every time I got down on my knees, your face came before me, and God would say, pray for Dad. And this guy didn't know me that well. And he said, I just want you to know, he said, I started saying, Lord, what's he going through? And the Lord showed me it has something to do with finances. And that was at the point I lost $2 million in 90 days. But I had asked God, I said, God, just let me know you're out there somewhere. You know, I mean, you get in such a deep hole sometimes that you can't see it. You cry, you travail, but when you get through praying, it's like, what? You know, I didn't hear anything there. You know, I didn't get any word. And this guy calls up right after that and says, you know, God showed me you're going through these times. I want to tell you something. He showed me that everything's going to be okay. You quit worrying about it, whatever it is. So I thought, my Lord, how awesome. But you know what my next thought was? Maybe he wasn't listening to God. You know, you go through these cycles of in a crisis, and it's kind of like the next morning I woke up and it was like, thank you, Lord. And then on the way to work, I thought, maybe he just made all that up. You know, boy, if he did, I'm dead meat. You know, if the Lord don't intervene here quickly, it's over with. Well, then great things started happening in the business right in the middle of the losses. The guy from USA Today that opened the first 17 plants for them called me up and said, hey, I want to come in and help you fix it. And I said, you mean like on vacation or weekends or something? He said, no. I said, I want to come to work for you. This guy was the president of USA Today Gannett. You ever heard of Gannett organization? $3 billion company. This guy's the president of their commercial printing division. In charge of all quality control for USA Today, wrote all the quality control manuals. This guy's known as the guru of quality in the industry. Gives over 100 speeches a year. This guy's all over. Big white handlebar mustache, very sweet-looking young man. 41 years old, totally snow white hair. What his business would be to you. Mine just falling out. I wish mine would turn white and just hang on. But I think I squeezed the life out of my hair follicles long before they could hang on. It was like, out they went. But right in the middle of the heat, this guy calls me and says, hey, I'd like to come in there and help you straighten it out. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And I knew at that moment at any cost I had to get to spend. And I said, what would it cost to get you down here? And he gave me a number that was about half of what he was making. And he said, I just think it would be fun to get up every day and have a challenge, and then when we do get it fixed, at least we'll be known for fixing it and being part of the resurrection of the company. I said, well, come on, let's talk. So we talked. He's in. He's doing a great job. In the process of him coming in, he was offered a job by another big company out of Canada for about $275,000 a year, salary, plus percentages and warrants on the company's stock. And he called me. This was like 3 weeks before he was supposed to come to work for me. And we had the deal all cut, and he called me and said, hey, Bud. They call you Bud when things are fixing to fall apart. Anybody ever call you Bud? Wave bye-bye, because they don't call you Bud or Doc unless they want something. But he said, Bud, I've been offered another job by Quebecor. And I said, well, go look at it. And he said, we're going up this weekend, taking my family up. It's right here close to the house. I don't have to move. I don't have to sell my home. $275,000, offered him $100,000. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's kind of like, I just had this real cold feeling all over. Kind of like, ooh. But I needed this man, and besides that, I had already told the bank I had attracted him. That's when you're really in trouble. When you don't attract him, it's kind of like, okay, fat face, what happened? These banks, you don't think, if you're an entrepreneur, you don't work for yourself. You work for every lender, every vendor, every customer. You have more bosses than you would work for AT&T. It's unbelievable. But, I run out of time? Oh, I was hearing tapping. That was supposed to be the signal. Maybe I'm going downhill. But anyhow, this guy went up and looked at this job. I'm going to move on faster now. Maybe it was 3 taps means move on. But this guy goes up and looks at this job with Quebecor, and I don't hear from him for about 5 days, and I'm just a nervous wreck. You know how you go through anticipation and all this stuff, and anxiety, and then anticipation and anxiety, and about the 4th day you decide to eat. And I'm telling you, you just, until you go through something like this, you'll never know what I'm talking about. And it does, I look back on some of the days, and it's really humorous, because it was days I didn't know I had not eaten until I got home that night. And I'd get home at 11 o'clock at night, 20-hour days, literally, and my wife would say, are you hungry? One of those things, and it's kind of like, yeah, maybe that's why I'm shaking. I haven't eaten anything all day, Yes, he said, well, have you drank any coffee? He said, yeah, 3 pots, So it's, but anyhow, this guy finally calls me about 5 days after after he goes up to Quebecor, and he looks at this job, and he says, I have to tell you, he said, this is an unbelievable opportunity up here at Quebecor. And I said, yeah, I was afraid of that. And he said, but, he just him-hawed around for about 15 or 20 minutes. You want people to pick on and say, hey, I'm not coming, bye, and hang up, and it's over with. The sting's gone. You sit there and cry, and your stomach gets nauseated, and you go, throw up, and it's over with. But he leads me on for about 15 or 20 minutes. I said, well, what's your decision, man? What are you going to do? He said, my wife looked at me on the way back from New Jersey, and she said, I don't see that same twinkle in your eyes as I did when you came back from Houston. And he said, babe, you're right. He said, I just don't feel like that's the right place to be. And I'm going to tell you, the man's either got some major problems or God's in it. You know what I'm saying? You don't leave $275,000 for $100,000 with a company that's absolutely on the skid. We're right there hanging by a thread. Any day anybody wants to clip that with a fingernail clipper, just down you go, And this guy walks off and leaves this job with one of the most profitable printing companies in the nation to come down here. But you know what? That's what we had been praying for, God to send us. If we were where we were supposed to be, I said, God, you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to keep the bank happy. You're going to have to get me somebody who knows what they're doing to help turn this thing around, because I'm obviously not the man. You ever get feeling that way? You're just not the man. I'm sure all you guys that go out and preach are probably going to feel that way many times. When you get off the platform tonight and nobody came to the altar, you preach your guts out, you're going to walk back to the back and go, God, obviously not the man. And especially when they hand you $20. Then it's like, I know I'm not the man. The Lord just spoke to me. I give to evangelists, okay? Because, I have a lot of friends that were evangelists and are evangelists, and I'm telling you what, that's why God didn't call me to be one, because I would be acid. I mean, the first night somebody gave me $20 for preaching, the next night they're dead meat, you know. I'd never even go back again, but I don't know how people do that, but I tell you what, God actually, it has to be a calling. It has to be a calling. It has to be the will of God for you to be there, and I think it's necessary. Okay. Anyhow, God has done marvelous things in our company. We were asked this week by our lender. In fact, they renewed our line of credit for another year and told us we had done a fabulous job turning the company around. October, we're back profitable again. November, we're back profitable again. After losing about $4 million in 1 year, we did one of the fastest turnarounds in the history of this lending institution, Signal Capital. And they called us day before yesterday and asked us to put together a turnaround team to go out and help them turn around other printing companies that they invest in. So, who knows what it's coming to? I don't. I just ask God to have his hand in it. Lead me, guide me, talk to me, show me. And, some profound information for you here. There was weeks and months that I didn't feel I was in the will of God. I didn't feel nothing. You know what I'm saying? You ever been there? And you wonder if you're just making all this up? I mean, I literally got to the point where I told my wife, I said, baby, I don't know. I can't figure this out. Man, look what all we've done. That's when you start making mistakes. When you start looking at what you've done and start trying to get recognition for that, that's when you realize you really messed up. But I said, look what we did good, and then all these bad things have happened. And my pastor, being the guy that he is, and he is a phenomenal man, and very, very close friend of mine, has been a personal friend since we were 4 years old. Learned to swim together. Dad threw both of us in Lake Austin simultaneously. And said, y'all swim back to the bank. And we did, both of us. Since that day we've both been swimming. But Brother Macy is a fine, fine man, and I give him a lot of credit for me being here today. But he called me one night in Louisville, Kentucky. 2 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting on the side of a motel bed with a Gideon's Bible. You know how I don't know if you ever read Gideon's Bible before, you almost feel guilty opening this silly thing up. But I was up there, and a guy wanted to buy the company, and he had offered me a deal to become president. I mean, this is in the middle of all this mess. This guy called me on Standard of Europe in Louisville, Kentucky. He called me. He said, I tell you what, Devin, come up here. I want you to be president of my company. I'll make sure you don't go in any chapter filing. I'll make sure nothing bad happens to you personally. I'll protect you. I'll give you what you're making now in salary. Blah, blah, blah. You have private use of the corporate jet, the whole thing. I'll come pick you up. I want you to come up here and let's talk about it. So I thought, man, this is God. This is it. Yeah, that's it. So I told my wife, I said, well, God has spoke. This is it. So she said, what is it? And I said, Mike Shea wants me to come to Louisville and be president of the company. And there's a good church there, man. The guy, is doing great in the church. And I said, that's the first thing I checked out. Was there a church in Louisville, the worker flip? And there was a good church there. So I said, well, that must be the will of God, I don't want to go to church that's no good. You laugh, but there's some bad churches out there, But no bad pastors, by the way. All the lay people are bad. But he came and picked me up, took me up to Louisville. I had spent 2 days up there with him, and he had me totally convinced that everything was, man, this is just the will of God. Everything worked out perfect. It was great. And I said, man, this is it. So I called my wife that night, and our church was doing a stuffing project. I don't know if any of you ever participated in these Pentecostal stuffing projects over that place, but we do a lot of these stuffing projects that just wear people right to the bone. And she had been... Oh, okay, you get by it. She had... I have to put up with him. You get by it. But my wife had been over at a project with our church, and Brother Macy had been praying. And he came with my wife at that project, and he said, well, what's Galen doing? She said, well, he's up in Louisville talking to Mike Shea. Mike offered him this big job and offered him all this money and offered to take the company over, and he was going to give me 35% of the entire organization. Net worth would have been somewhere around $35 million. Private jet to our disposal. And, the whole thing, it was like, boy, you don't like being Pentecostal. This is awesome. I like UPC, At that point, you want to brand it on your forehead, But 2 o'clock in the morning, seriously, we got in the room about 10 o'clock that night, and my chief financial officer was down in another room, and he called me and said, I need to come down and talk to you. So he came down and he said, do you feel good about this thing? And of course he didn't, because he was going to get, cut. So I was trying to be pretty realistic with him. I said, well, it's one of those deals. You justify everything. Let me tell you something. You can justify anything you want to justify. I've been there. Talking from experience, I've justified a lot of things that I said had to be the will of God. And I look back on a lot of them today, and I go, my Lord, no wonder he did not knock me flat. Seriously. And in fact, November the 2nd, he did. Blow drying my hair in Tampa, Florida, and ended up on the floor in traction for 6 days with no leg usage. And that's when God said, okay, boy, slow down. I fixed it now. You fix to ruin it again. So, that. Up in Louisville, talked to this boy. I even read him a couple of scriptures, I was getting into it, showing how God's will works in different ways, and talking to Job and all this stuff. And he left and went back to his room about 12:15. I started praying, and the most awesome spirit came in that room I've ever felt in my entire life. And, it was just a warm, it's just like, if there was a way to describe it, it's almost like being dipped in hot honey. I was warm all over. Inside, I was just tingling. And I was reading a lot of scriptures in there. In trying to get in the Bible, there's equal things like thinking about suicide, read, thinking about murder, read. Have you ever read the Gideon Bible? It's in the front cover. I'm serious. And the first thing you do when you're not thinking about suicide, you open it up and start thinking about suicide. It's like, Jesus Christ, I'm not thinking about suicide. So I get on back to Job, read some good stuff, Scared me to death. I said, I'm not even going to read the scripture. I wouldn't even want the Lord to think I'd even thought about that, Whew. But I read down there, it said, are you despondent, are you confused? And it gives all these scriptures. So I started reading those scriptures. I'll go back down and read the scriptures. And I've been praying about 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. And I thought, well, Robert must not be able to sleep. So I picked the phone up and I said, hello. And I've been crying, and so I tried to clean my act up. Being the president, CEO of the company, you don't answer the phone crying. It really does disturb a few of you people. When you keep telling them everything's fine, God's going to take care of it. And you answer the phone, it's like, no. It don't work. It don't work. It's the same way you tell your church finances are all right, and then you do that. It just wouldn't work. But it was Brother Macy. And he said, hey, what are you doing? And I didn't tell him where I was going. This is one of the things when you think about changing churches, you don't go tell your pastor. That's not even sound reasoning. And you know the man as well as I do. He'd told me absolutely flat-footed, you're not going to get yourself back in the prayer room. The way he is. Obviously you haven't prayed about this meathead, get yourself in there. But he said, what are you doing there? And I said, well, man, he's offered to do this, and this. And he said, how can you do that when you haven't stepped out on faith yet? And then I couldn't talk to him. It tore me up. And I had to just hang up. I couldn't answer him. Because it dawned on me that I had not stepped out on faith. This was before the guy from Jeanette came to work for me. This was like in November, after I'd had about 90 days of massive attacks and losses. He said, you haven't stepped out on faith. He said, you're trying to reason all this out for yourself. And you're trying to use all this sound reasoning you think you have and all this logic, all this common horse sense to work all this out. And he said, that ain't God's way. And he said, I think you're making a major error, and I think you ought to get yourself on an airplane from home. I said, ooh. So I didn't really say okay. I just was crying. I hung up the phone. I see reflections back in the window, people. But I never knew you could do that from the platform. Only the sound men. But I went in the next morning and talked to this guy. I had breakfast with him, and I said, look, I think it's going to be best that I go back home. And I mean, we had all the agreements working. You know, I mean, he was putting it all together. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I think I can pull it out. And here the day before, I'm going, ain't no way. Ain't happening. And he looked at me and he said, you okay? I said, yeah. I said, I'm fine. But I said, I think that I've got a couple things I've got to try first. And he said, go ahead. Used to be in the pulpit, and especially with people talking behind you, different. When I talk at the office, everybody listens. But that don't happen here, I understand. Oh, that's what it is. I'm invited here. I'm sorry. That's true. Where'd you get some red suspenders? You always dress like this? There we go. You do that when your belt cuts off circulation. You go to these kind of things. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm back in it again. Anyhow, long story short, we came home. We turned it over to God. And literally turned it over to him and said, God, it's yours. And since that time, we've made a drastic turnaround. And I'm going to tell you, if we hadn't have put it back in God's hands, there's no telling what mess I would be in Louisville, Kentucky today. 3 weeks ago, the plant in Louisville, Kentucky caught on fire, exploded, killed about 7 people, burned it to the ground. I was flat on my back at the hospital when it happened. And I thought to myself, when I got the word, I mean, they called me immediately and said, hey, man, Shay's plant just burned up. And, you know, the funniest feeling went through me. And it wasn't that God burned his plant down to show me I was in the will of God. I mean, I know that's not the way God works. But it was just like you see the benefits suddenly of living for God. And crisis means nothing. Crisis, if we take it as being a sharpening stone, as being a whet rock on ourselves, as being something that will purify your thoughts, get your mind on God, buddy, it can do that. And suddenly everything you do takes on a brand new meaning. And hopefully today what you get out of this will be nothing more than just keep everything simple. All right? The more I complicate the mess I'm in, the bigger mess I make. And the bigger deal you put together, the bigger the mess gets. And it seems like the more we simplify it, the better it gets. The more I have simplified my life, the better our home life has been. And I've always had a great home life, got a great wife. Supported me 100%. You know what she said when we got in trouble? And guys, look for wives like this. I wish I could tell you how to find one up front before you get into trouble. I'm just very blessed. My wife looked at me and she said, what are you worried about? And I said, well, it's nothing really. You know, lose everything we have, file personal bankruptcy, no cars, you know, no boats, no home, no farm. She said, we didn't have anything 5 years ago. I said, well, you know, that ain't a bad way to look at it. I'm talking to one of our attorneys one day, and he said, what are you worried about? I said, what do you mean, what am I worried about? You know, you talk to these guys totally different because you're paying them. He said, you know, I don't understand what you're saying. He said, look, they can't eat you. And I said, boy, is that a perspective on life. And once you realize that they can't do anything to you, then it's like, okay, now I'll step out on faith. Because really, there's nothing anybody can do to you. Because all the material things that we place value in mean nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I'll tell you how little they do mean. I have a little Mercedes SL little car, a two-seater, and spent real big dollars to buy it here a couple years back. And I went down to trade it in. They want me to pay them $11,000 to take it. Pardon me? Yeah, that's how much value the things have lost because of the economy. It's like, you want me to give you $11,000 to take my car? Yeah. But, I mean, material things have no value. And that's just one little silly little example. But there's nothing that we own that we can put our hands on that you're going to take with you. Not one thing. So do God's work. And hopefully that's what I'm doing. I am trusting that God leads me in a direction that will be in His full will. And every day that I pray, if God keep me humble, keep me in your will. You know, if you want me to keep selling printing, I'll do it. By the way, we sell, you guys don't have mailboxes, or do you? Do I have mailboxes? Surely you don't get junk mail in your mailboxes. You know all this junk that you see when you go home, all these ads and stuff? That's what we do. We print millions and millions of pieces. In fact, last year our plant in Houston printed 1 billion pieces of that stuff. Finished pieces. The plant in Denver printed about 580 million pieces. But, you know, you really realize that this is just a means to an end. This is not it. That God has great things to use people in if you'll just be used by God. There's one last thing. I have got a vested interest in you as individuals, and that vested interest goes all the way back to the way I was raised and why I'm here today, and that is to lead others to God. And the interest that I have in you is to hope that some little something I've said today will lead you in a direction that keeps you walking for God and living for God and keeps you winning souls, because that's really all that matters. When you get right down to the base of the Bible, that's what we're here to do, to win souls and to witness. And the other thing that I have a vested interest in today is the United Pentecostal Church as an organization, because it has a lot of faults, and I'm very quick to critique a lot of their problems and a lot of their poor literature and poor quality and on and on and on. I hate mediocrity. I just absolutely hate it. I don't know if God gave me that or my mother did, but I just hate it. But I think that it's not going to change until some of us step up to the line and say, okay, I'm willing to make a change. I'm willing to help you change it. And I get that opportunity here very quickly in the literature side. But I have a vested interest in it because I think it's the best thing going. It's not perfect. You know, it never will be perfect as long as the humans run it. But, I mean, I approve that myself. But I'm going to tell you, there's not much out there that's any better. Okay, because we've got to hang on to our holiness standards. We've got to hang on to what we believe to be the truth. And as long as it's based on the Bible, you can't go wrong. You know, anytime we start interjecting our own ideas, you're going downhill. In fact, this simple little Bible study, that was one of the wars we had all along. Was a couple of us would say, why don't we put in this thought, or why don't we put in that thought? And one of the other ones would drag us back in the mainstream and say, no, if you do that, all you're doing is diluting it. So right in the introduction of the piece, we put in there that we're not trying to change what God's already done for you, and we're not trying to lead you to believe any creed of any denomination. Just the Bible. And hopefully the United Pentecostal Church will believe in the Bible going forward and continue to stand for it. And if it don't, what are we going to do? We're going to find something that does believe in the Bible. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be apostolic as the hair lips of the governor of Texas. You know what I'm saying? If you make up your mind that that's the way you're going to feel about it, and that's the way you're going to live, you're not going to have any problem doing it. You are going to have some problems. Life is difficult. You ever thought about that? There's not one thing in life that's easy. Life's difficult. Once you realize life is difficult, the rest of it becomes pretty easy. But if you think life is great, then every little problem comes along and you just battle it. But if you realize it's difficult, you just live with it, work through it. And by the way, there's a very distinct cycle on crisis. Anytime you go through a crisis, there's several very distinct cycles that you'll go through. And if I had more time, I'd go through them with you because they're very, really enlightening, because you'll all go through crisis, and if you could ever learn those cycles, you'll know what period you're at anytime during the cycle, crisis. The crisis cycle, crisis, whatever. Okay. Well, I want you to know that I have thoroughly enjoyed being here today. Our time is up here in about 3 or 4 more minutes. I hope that in some way, that in the future, that we can see Texas Bible College with a new campus and with new facilities in its entirety, new dorms, upscale, something that can make you feel like you're part of something that's positive. And I know that you've got a very nice facility here, and it's because people have been determined to make it nice. Can't say it's in the nicest part of Houston. I got 3 people watching my car as we speak. No, sorry. Joke. Okay. Probably should have had 3 people watching my car. Has anybody got a Bible on you? I'll leave you with one scripture. Habakkuk 3 and 17 and 18. Somebody would stand up and read that for me. And this is really my testimony today and the way I want to live my life. 3, 17, and 18. If everything goes wrong, that's what it's saying. If everything goes wrong, if the fig tree don't even bear, and boy, you know how fruitful a fig tree is? I mean, it'll bear twice a year if the wind changes. Well, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. And I tell you what, that is the key to success. If everything goes wrong, I'm going to rejoice in the Lord in the God of my salvation. And that's the way we have to be today to survive this life that we live. You go back to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that little old simple story. I heard it all my life. I've talked about this several times in several different classes. But I love what those guys told that guy. When he was fixing to chunk them in the fire, buddy, I wish I had that kind of stamina. He said, throw us in there. Our God's able to save us. But even if he doesn't, if we can get the even if he doesn't attitude, you ain't got no problem. All right? God bless y'all very much. Love y'all. Thank you.